Hey everyone, Matt Pisarcik from Razor Emporium. We decided to do a very different video here showing this really decrepit Fatboy. We got notified about this on one of the Facebook groups. Somebody tagged us. Somebody had found this razor and it looks like it had been sitting on the bottom of the ocean floor for for decades. So one thing you notice, it's not clicking at all here, and it's also spinning. That means the collet is loose, and you can see how bad of shape it's in. I mean, the plating's completely shot here. We've literally got holes in the handle. We got deep pits, deep holes almost in the doors. The guard has been completely bent and corroded away. And this is what happens when the nickel plating's all gone. People always ask me, like, what's going to happen to brass without proper care? Now, obviously, this is an extreme case, but brass will corrode, especially if there's something left on the surface, like salt water or water in general, or even soap can do this over time. So the first step that we're going to do here is start by taking it apart. Now, we just have a clever little tool we made out of a washer to take this bottom notch off. People always refer to these service notches. We can take apart the other style as well. The other thing I just noticed is that spring is not even the correct spring inside. The mechanism itself really didn't want to work too well. Didn't really want to open it up, properly because the guard's so bent, but managed to take it apart here. This usually I need to have a tool to take that head out, but it actually just pulled out because of how badly damaged this piece is. So I've started to now get it all into individual components, just kind of looking everything over. This part here, the collar that has the black line, does need an extraction vise to take out. So I'm going to do that here. And it actually accidentally took the bottom knob off, and that's fine. That can come off as well. But now I'll use a different method to get the collar out. So we push that out. I've got everything down into individual pieces, so I'm now going to throw it onto a copper wire, and we're going to get this into our stripping bath. We use a proprietary chemical that just needs some heat and some agitation, and it takes all the nickel off, so it's really great for us. And we do this to keep everyone's razors straight. Usually we would put a little tag on here to make sure we know what ticket number, what order number that razor is in reference to. So it's come out of the stripper. It has to take about an hour, 2 hours to fully strip. And I'm just kind of taking off some of the hard to remove junk that's sitting on the surface. I'll now use the ultrasonic cleaner to kind of fully take that stripper off, just to try to get the parts really clean and dry so I can properly assess the metal condition. It's hard to see when they're wet and full of gunk, so I want to make sure I'm looking at the actual brass and not more the compound. Now I'm going to take it all off the copper wire, and again, kind of just lay out all my pieces and generally give everything a good look over. And now with the nickel plating off, I can really see the damage that's occurred. And this is something that's so critical to what we do. This is why we don't call our service the replating service. We call it the Revamp, because most of the work you're going to see here in the next few minutes is all going to be the resurfacing work that's needed to really make the plating shine. If we don't do the resurfacing work, it's going to look exactly like this when we're done. So the first thing I'm going to do is work on these doors, take it over to a belt sander, and just start sanding away some of these big marks. We also have a lot of other wheels and a lot of other tools to choose from. This is a kind of a resurfacing wheel here, a 3M radial wheel, and now I'm actually going to take it onto a cotton wheel with some compounds, deburring wheel. I mean, we have just a bevy of tools to choose from. It's kind of like the dentist office, lots of little tools to do different things. The ultimate goal, obviously, is to remove as much of the corrosion and damage as I can, and also to smooth out the metal and try to make it flat. Like this here, I'm trying to get rid of some big scars and flatten things up so that it looks stock again, as stock as we can make it. But I always tell people, it's a lot like a haircut. I can only take metal away. I can't add anything back. And to get rid of, a deep gouge or a big pit, I have to go past that pit and make everything straight and flat in relation to that. So especially things like the stamping on the bottom, I can only do so much. There's still going to be a lot of these scars left even when we're done. But the areas that are flat without any markings, you can kind of go out a little bit more aggressively. That's what I'm doing here, just trying to really smooth things out. This is one of my favorite wheels. This is a brass burnishing wheel. It just does so well of kind of blending the brass and really getting rid of marks. And so another kind of thing to note, This is going to be our factory finish that we're going to end up with on this razor. With such bad pitting and marks, I would never recommend rhodium or gold because it's just going to make them look even worse. But the factory nickel is kind of a semi-bright finish, and it'll kind of obscure some of that. The first problem here we ran into is the T-bar. The little rivets are loose, so I'm actually going to take it over to my brazing torch. This uses oxygen and propane, and I'm going to heat up the metal, put some flux on it, and I'm going to drip some solder and have it flow into the joint to secure this on a 90-degree angle so that the center bar actually does its job and raise and lower the doors symmetrically and straight. I'm going to crimp it together here to make sure that we have a good solid connection, and it's kind of being clamped together while the solder is fusing and drying here. So I'll do both sides. You can see how bad this looks right now, but just after we're done, we'll do some refinishing. We'll quench it here just to cool it off so I can start working on it again. And you'll see my solder joint needs some touching up. You have to get rid of the excess solder. So again, I got to go back to resurfacing. This is a radial wheel that's doing some sanding. We've now got back to my favorite burnishing wheel. Again, trying to blend that solder in and kind of make it so it's not going to stick out when it gets plated. Soldering is something that I would say we have to do maybe on 10 or 20% of razors just to fix little issues here and there. It's something that sets us apart. Not all the other guys out there have these jewelry tools to do, soldering and brazing and stuff. So this is that little black collar, as you guys think of it, that little black line that you see. That's actually a what we call a collet. It holds the entire head into the handle with a clamping feature. And so I'm just trying to take out some marks there. I'm just going to go one at a time. Here's this dial. Look how bad this looks. So much damage here. This is actually something I'm quite proud of how it turned out in the end. Did a lot of work on this. And again, there's a fine balance between sanding or deburring or polishing too much and having the stamped numbers be kind of bled out and not be so crisp. So I'm trying really hard to smooth the underlying metal, but not erase the numbers and not have the fine edge of them kind of bleed into the surrounding metal. So a lot of this comes down to experience. A lot of it comes down to skill, trial and error. When I first started doing this stuff years ago, there were mistakes, and I made most of them on my own razors. But this is something that is kind of the artistry of what we do. It's not just, dunk it in a tank and it takes care of everything. This is all hand work. And this is what the Revamp service is all about. It's something that is an incredibly skilled process. And, for myself and for my team, it's something that takes months to really perfect. We have new technicians start on simple things like 3-piece razors and stuff. To do this kind of stuff is really, like my lead technician would usually do this kind of work. So the dial is looking pretty good. I'm trying to do a light polish on it, really just to remove some metal. I'm using a green aluminum oxide compound here. You notice we don't use any flits or any kind of polishes like that. All things we use are more commercial, more jewelry compounds and equipment. I'm trying to re-establish these little lines you see on the adjustment wheel through a combination of using the knife blade a few minutes ago you saw. But look how much better this looks. It doesn't look perfect at all, but it's way better than what we started with. And that's part of the reason we're doing this video, is to kind of teach you guys and show you guys the limitations of what we can do. Obviously, this razor is one of the most extreme cases. So I finished these parts without filming them. They were kind of similar to the other parts. Now we're going to finally get racked up for plating. So here's a plating rack. Everything has to receive electricity through the parts. We use copper wire to conduct that. It's going onto a metal frame rack, and that's going to hold all of our parts. We can plate things more than just one piece at a time. A lot of the guys out there have smaller 1-liter beakers, small beaker plating system. That's where we started, but now we've graduated to doing a lot more work. And so we process things in 100-gallon plating tanks. So the first process is going to be an ultrasonic. You'll see me turn that on here. And this is going to just make sure all my polishing compounds off. If you're wondering what those balls are, that is to prevent a lot of excess heat in the room, because this is at 170 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm now going to rinse it off. It's going to go into an acetic process here to etch the metal. And that's going to make sure that it can receive the next step, which will be copper plating. So this is kind of just a real mild acid to etch it. Think of it like a fine piece of sandpaper before you stain. So now it's going to go into copper. You see that coming out nice ruby red, brilliant copper. And now it's going into our nickel tank. So the copper is for adhesion. Nickel doesn't want to stick onto brass alone. But now you're seeing the beautiful nickel come out, and these pieces are replated. You see how quick the plating went. It's all the resurfacing work, guys. That's what we really are doing most of the time, is resurfacing. The plating takes just minutes. It's all the prep work beforehand that makes it really look good. So I'm going to take all the parts off, and we are going to kind of look at our work here and assess this. This one door turned out pretty good on the outside. Inside obviously looks pretty bad. The other door looked pretty bad overall. Yeah, look at that. It's still got some gnarly chunks in it, inside and out. And again, I can't add that metal back on. But we're gonna do our best. This guard, wow, it's got some holes in it. It's definitely seen its day. The plating doesn't magically fill all that back in. We got holes here in the handle. Definitely worse for wear. Again, this is at the absolute extreme. This is probably one of the worst razors I've ever seen in our shop. The base plate actually looked really good. I was really happy with the resurface work, and look how nice that dial looks now. Most of the damage is gone. You can't even see my solder joint. Look at that. It's like it never happened. That's what we really go for here, is to try to make sure our work is impossible to see. And here we're going to mask off the handle. I love using this Teflon tape. We will mask off the entire handle, and then we'll powder coat the black line. And I love the Teflon tape because it goes on easy. It's cheap. I can get it at the hardware store. It also is temperature resistant, so it can take the 400-degree temperature of the oven. So here we're just spraying on a flat black powder coat. We used to do airbrush and like enamel paint for the black line, but the powder coat's the absolute most durable thing. So just a cheap little toaster oven here to bake that on. It just takes a few minutes, and you're going to have an extremely durable black line that won't come off without a good amount of effort to try to take it off. So we'll start the reassembly process here. We got our bottom tray and our guard, and we have our clicker, and that entire assembly goes into the handle, into that little collet. We push it together with an arbor press, and now it more or less, the head's halfway assembled. We're going to put the doors onto the center bar, and we're going to get these to go down through the handle, and then attach that, put a spring and the bottom plate, and it should have our butterfly action restored. And it's almost done. Yep, here we go with the correct compression spring and the bottom plate. Yeah, again, the compression spring that was in there before was not the correct one at all. So that could affect the butterfly action if it doesn't have the right tension to open it. That's in place. Now we're going to do a lot of little tweaks and stuff to make sure things open up correctly and the blade gap's correct. But here's kind of an initial look at what this could be. If we left all the original parts, this is about as good as it's going to get. This is what we call our factory finish. You notice it doesn't have a mirror shine, but it is bright and shiny. I call it a semi-bright finish or semi-shiny finish. I actually really like the factory finish. We're going for what Gillette did on most of their razors. Their super speeds, techs, adjustables were all in this factory finish. Their higher end razors were more shiny and polished, like the Aristocrat or President or whatever, but this is their baseline finish. We achieve it with all the resurfacing work you saw. We also do a tumbling step that we did not show. It's kind of a proprietary secret stuff we do, but we get this really beautiful semi-bright finish. But look at these. Look at this damage here. I mean, it's better, but it's not magically just perfect now. I'm really proud of that bottom plate. I was, so happy that we could at least read D4 and Gillette again. That didn't go away. But man, that door, and that guard, and that handle. So here's another reason we call it the Revamp service. We have a whole library of parts here. We have thousands of razors we've worked on over the decades, and we can actually offer replacement pieces on most models for a nominal fee. So we're going to kind of show you what that would look like if we replace some of these really bad parts, and with parts we already have on hand. So the customer normally would be contacted here, and we would be offered the opportunity to change out parts. Some customers take us up on it, some customers don't. They want to say, hey, no, this is grandfather's, or this is something really special, I don't want to do that, or I don't have the budget for it. Other customers are like, heck yeah, let's do the best we can, let's make it great, you know. And so we're going to switch out that really gnarly door for another door we had. We're also just going to switch out the entire handle, because even the upper part of the original handle is pretty bad. So we'll put that on, a new guard as well. So, you know what, we have 11-piece razor, and we're switching out the handle and the guard and a door. So a small percentage of the razors being changed out. But again, this is something that is an option for customers. Not everyone wants to do this, but we like to offer that service, and something that makes us unique. I don't know of a lot of other companies that have the library of parts that we do and can offer this. We're going to push it all back together with our arbor press. And this is, you know, a assembling process that we've kind of learned and perfected over the years. I wish I would have got assembly instructions and directions from Gillette, but we've kind of had to reverse engineer and figure all this out. Here we're just doing some little tweaks and adjustments with a jeweler's plier before we reassemble the door assembly. It's looking pretty good so far. It's looking a lot better than it did. This razor probably could now properly shave you. Before, you know, you're worried about the guard kind of maybe scraping you, and the door wasn't maybe fully holding the blade down. So we're checking blade gap now before we do any final step here of putting the bottom plate on. Yeah, and our little homemade tool. We can take apart all the razors. People think that you have to have the service notches. You don't. There's different ways to take apart the other Fatboys and Slims and other razors. Again, we've had to figure it all out. So we're just kind of looking at this, making sure it opens nice and even, and making little adjustments to the center bar to get the doors to be symmetrical as they open. This is all part of the reason we call it Revamp, not just Replate, because we're going to make sure the razor's back to a functional state and kind of a factory spec state. Lastly, we will paint the numbers. So we've used the same process for, you know, years here. We just use a tester's enamel paint and put it on with a toothpick is perfectly fine. You don't need a fancy little brush. Put a big blob over the numbers and then basically wipe off the excess, and you get a nice crisp clean number with very little specialty equipment here. And enamel paint is what Gillette used. It's fairly durable. So those numbers, again, don't look perfect, but they look way better than what we started with. You can still see a lot of age signs on the dial, but with a new handle, new guard, and one new door, it certainly is much closer to the state we want it to be in. It's kind of a mixed outcome. You know, I think we definitely achieved what we wanted to achieve. We brought something back to best possible condition it can be in without just fully replacing everything and kind of scrapping that original razor out. But if this was someone's heirloom, they may really appreciate the fact that it's brought back to life to this degree. Is it perfect? No, but it actually shows signs of its age and its history. Who knows? Maybe it was on the bottom of the ocean floor, and that's some of the corrosion and some of the marks left behind. But if someone wanted to use this, it's perfectly functional now. It adjusts, it opens, and with a good nickel plate on it and properly cared for, it should last for decades. But I mean, look at this before and after, guys. This is pretty extreme. And again, really the purpose of this video was to show the limitations of what we could do. You know, we can't bring back things and make them look perfect when they look like this to begin with. But that's part of our revamp service. And if you have any questions about what we can do or cannot do, always send pictures first, and we'd be happy to help you guys out. That's all I got. Any comments, please leave below. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and thanks for choosing Razor Emporium for all things vintage shaving. Have a good one, guys.